Maxpro ELITE has been exhaustively tested for nutritional composition. All the batches now that are in production are all tested, and they're all meeting 30 grams of protein per serving. So, we do have a guarantee that serving amount is right on, which is very important. The difference between Maxpro ELITE and Maxpro, very significant, is the micellar casein that we added and all the benefits of micellar casein. Clearly that's an important formulation advantage to the two products because, like I said, we basically added, there's only so many things you can add and keep in that taste profile. But the addition of micellar casein to me is a strong point, on the differences in terms of the science. And when you look at the naturally occurring amino acids, each serving of Maxpro ELITE delivers 6.6 grams of the branched chain amino acids with 3 grams alone of leucine. This is naturally occurring. We do not add or spike Maxpro ELITE. You're also getting about 4.4 technically grams of glutamine per serving. These are very important advantages of the BCAAs and glutamine per serving that naturally occur. So you do get, the benefits of that. The proteins that we use in Maxpro ELITE does come from dairy. It does come from milk or bovine. And milk, from cows is primarily 3.5% protein. So if you look at, the total composition of nutrients in milk, it's about 3.5% protein. And of that, we have the primary proteins, which are whey and casein. Actually, by percentage, most of the protein in milk of that 3.5% is casein. About 80% is casein and 20% is whey. Whey is also called serum. It's a very soluble fraction, but we basically have two main fractions within the composition of milk. Casein is very interesting. It's a very large molecule compared to whey, and it has a characteristic micelle, meaning that it forms these little globules where the inner part is hydrophobic, meaning it does not interact with water, and the outer part is hydrophilic. It does have charges on it, and so it will interact with water. Milk is primarily water, aqueous, high percentage of water in milk. So you basically have protein fractions that need to be very soluble in water. Whey is very soluble. Like I said, it contains serum. It does not contain phosphorus or calcium or other minerals where casein does. So casein has a high percentage of phosphates and also calcium. So a lot of the caseins are like potassium caseinate or calcium caseinate in terms of the description. The major proteins in casein are primarily glycomacropeptides, casomorphins, and casein phosphopeptides. So there's a number of bioactive peptides in casein which are different than in whey, whereas the major proteins in whey are beta-lactoglobulin and alpha-lactoalbumin. You clearly have different properties within the two proteins. You do have the whey, you do have the casein. Actually, there's a family of caseins, both alpha and beta casein, so, it gets a lot more complicated. But basically, for characteristics of formulation and composition of protein, basically the whey protein isolate, I think most know that it's about a 90% by weight protein, so it's very high in protein. Whey protein concentrate that we described is 80% protein by weight. The potassium caseinate is about 93% protein by weight, and the micellar casein is about 80%. So we have a varying percentages of a protein using a WPI, WPC, potassium caseinate, and micellar casein. Maxpro ELITE, just based on the formulation, should absorb typically in a healthy individual about, every 4 hours or so. It is true that the multi-source protein with the additional micellar casein can absorb up to 7 hours. It is a kind of a subjective timing because it's a longer term timing, but the amount, we're not just giving you one single fraction of micellar casein by itself. If you were to take just micellar casein by itself, and again, this is just my opinionated answer, then maybe you could extend out to, 4 to 5 hours. But because it is a multi-source protein and the micellar casein is the smallest fraction of that, even in integrating with your nutrition plans every, 4 hours would still make sense, because you're also looking at the total dose, the total 30 grams of protein, independent of the breakdown to achieve that. There's a lot of interesting information on protein timing. The timing, a pulse, taking single boluses versus small frequent pulses. And, the studies very strongly support the fact that taking multi-servings of a 30-gram protein throughout the day is going to have a greater effect on muscle protein synthesis or myofibril protein synthesis. So taking it all at one time is not as beneficial as kind of breaking it out throughout the day. I think many of you know that WPI absorbs very quickly. It's a very fast-acting protein. Actually, by characteristics, WPI and WPC are kind of considered fast-acting proteins. So in terms of absorption, which is dependent on a variety of physiological conditions and also gender and age and fasting and other things like that in terms of how quickly you absorb a individual protein fraction. WPI, the whey protein isolate, generally absorbs quickly within an hour, actually more of a half hour. There's different data out there in animals and in humans, and it is based on physiological condition. But generally, we're looking at about an hour of complete absorption of a single dose of WPI. WPC a little bit longer, about 1.5 hours. And then when you get into the caseinates, the potassium caseinate and the micellar casein, because of their size, because of the mechanisms of digestion and absorption in the gut, and the various proteases that need to kind of break up the micelle, you're looking at absorption times for up to 7 hours that have been identified in the literature. So you do have a wide spectrum of absorption times. There's a lot of support of multi-source protein, and that's been the philosophy of a lot of Max Muscle products in terms of single source, like a single WPI versus a multi-source protein. And the evidence in the literature strongly supports multi-source protein because of the absorption time characteristics for muscle protein synthesis, for growth and development. And actually, if you look at, milk itself and the design of milk, and why human milk and cow's milk and other species of milk are needed early in life is to support rapid growth and development of young animals. And even if you look at human milk for humans and the composition and whey protein, for cows and things like that, you do find, because of the high protein content, the characteristic of growth. So it supports that. And basically, the literature, if you were to compare, and we do make the claim, structure-function claim on Maxpro, that it supports a greater nitrogen retention than whey by itself. This is based on several factors. One is absorption time. 2 would be nitrogen balance, where the body is holding on to more nitrogen, and nitrogen retention. So basically, the evidence supports by numerous studies that a multi-source protein versus whey by itself will promote more or a positive nitrogen balance for a longer period of time, and also nitrogen retention. So it does support that, and we've actually shown that in a graph in a current ad in the magazine. I think most of you know on the flavors, currently we have available the chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, banana, and cinnamon roll. Then we have upcoming flavors, which are orange, blueberry, natural vanilla, and chocolate malt. So those will be 8 flavors. Then we've recently approved, just to mention, s'mores, cookies and cream, chocolate mint, and chocolate peanut butter. Those are currently just in the approval phase of R&D. Our goal is to come out with many, many flavors of Maxpro ELITE. I would recommend taking Maxpro ELITE as a recovery shake, even though we do have recovery products, with creatine, would be a great post-exercise timing combination. I wanted to mention the glycine. In the chart, the typical amino acid dose per serving chart that's listed on the label and also in the product data sheet, it does list glycine, and the question has come up, is that glycine added? No, that glycine naturally occurs. So all those amino acids in the chart naturally occur. We do not add any additional amino acids or anything to that formulation. So people shouldn't think that the glycine is listed. That means it has been added. So I hope that is clear.